Hello, welcome to the first webinar of DigiCrash project. In this webinar we are talking about advanced game design techniques. My name is Carvalho. Talk a little bit about myself. I'm a professor at Porto Polytechnic, computer engineering department, where I teach mostly about serious games and game design and development. I am also a vice director of the Guild Research and Development Group. The acronym GUILD stands for Games, Interaction and Learning Technologies, and the idea is to use these technologies like games, artificial intelligence, mobile systems and so on, trying to improve the performance of educational systems, so to make a better learning process. And from this research group we created a company which is called Virtual Campus, which basically takes this technology and implements this technology in products to the market. So basically we try to extend all the research and development that we do at the Polytechnic into this company. So let's go back a little bit to the basics. What is a game? Because all of us play games, right? I mean, even if it is just a casual game that we play when we are waiting for someone, so we take out our phone, our mobile phone, and then we create this game. We play this game. And normally we think that games are very fun, friendly, flexible, free environments. But actually games are very structured environments. Like this definition that from Karen Sellen that says, a game is a system in which players engage in artificial conflicts, defined by clear rules that results in a quantifiable outcome. So we are talking about an environment that is not real, it's artificial, and that allows us to escape from our real life. It's a very structured environment in the sense that we have very clear rules in the game, and those rules guide us into achieving a certain outcome, which we expect to be victory. So we expect to beat our competitors or solve all the challenges in the game. So it's a very restricted and structured environment. And that means that a good game design, in fact, is the process of creating goals that the player feels motivated to reach, and rules that the player must follow as he or she makes meaningful decisions in pursuit of those goals. So good game design is creating goals that motivate players to reach them, and sometimes to play the game for tens or hundreds of hours to reach that goal. Okay, so it's a very complicated process, not only because creating these roles and goals and goals is quite difficult, but also because each individual person is different from the next one. So the motivation of the individual person is very different. Mark Prensky, which works a lot with digital game-based learning, proposes these 12 motivational factors for games. So games, he says, are a form of fun, and that gives us enjoyment and pleasure. Games are a form of play that gives us intense and passionate involvement. Games have rules, so that gives us structure. And for many people, this concept of structure is very important. Games have goals, and that gives us motivation to play the game. Games are interactive, and that gives us doing. Games are adaptive, in the sense that challenges that we face in games are normally very well adjusted to our level of performance and competence. And that gives this flow, that means that gives us immersion. Games have outcomes and feedback, that gives us learning. Games have win states, and that gives us ego gratification. Games can have conflict and competition, and that gives us adrenaline. Games have problem solving, and that sparks our creativity. Games have interaction, and that gives us social relationships. And finally, games can have representation, story, narrative, and that gives us emotion. And of course, for each person, the most important factor why they play games is different. Okay, for some, it's the fact that they have competition with other players. For some, it's the fact that they have a strong narrative. For others are the problem-solving aspects. And we are not just focusing a single of these aspects. So we are sort of composing a picture that have different weights for these factors. So it's very difficult to, if not impossible, to actually create a game that caters for all types of persons or all types of gamers. This is another taxonomy created by Quantic Foundry, where they try to define different types of gamers. And basically what they say is we have action gamers, those that like the excitement, the fast-paced action, destruction, explosions, and so on. The second type is social player. They like to collaborate, they like to compete, so they like to be in teams, they like to have this social relationship. The players that like to think, so they like logic challenges, strategic decisions. Then we have players that are focused on the achievement, on completing all the tasks, completing all the missions, collecting all the items they have available. The ones that are mostly focused on the story and narrative. And finally, the ones that focus on creativity. So they like to create new things. So a game like Minecraft is very adjusted to these players because they are able to create their own worlds in this game. So, how do we design games? How do we start by designing games? The first thing is we should play many games, so as many games as possible, because we need to develop a vocabulary of mechanics and dynamics. These are the basic building blocks of the games. And we must know what is available, because only when we have this understanding and this knowledge of the game mechanics and dynamics, then we can create our own mechanics and our own dynamics. And so we should play not only the games that we like to play, but as a good game designer, we need to play games that are also not so interesting for us, but we need to be aware of whatever is available out there, because otherwise we are going only to create games that are interesting for us. And if we are doing games just for us, it's a very limited audience. Another important aspect is networking with other game designers, but also with other persons, with story writers, with visual artists, with programmers, creating these multi-background persons, so we can expose our ideas and get feedback from different persons, and especially people that come from a different background and can provide us with different feedback. We also must be aware that game design is a creative process. So like any other creative profession, we need always to be aware that game ideas can come from everywhere, from our everyday life. So we always should be alert for new ideas. Any situation that we face in our life can create and prompt some basic concepts, some basic ideas that later on can be refined. So we should always be aware of these and take notes every time we face some situation that strikes us as interesting, as funny, as something that we could use. That might be a potential game idea, so we should take note and be always alert for those possible ideas. The ideation methods, we have different ideation methods that can come from what we call blue sky. That means an open canvas, white canvas, where we can design from scratch whatever we want. It's the most creative and open process, but at the same time is the most difficult one, because we don't have a starting point. The starting point can come from our ideas that we collected in our life, but it's sometimes very difficult to start doing something from an empty space. So that means that when we have, for instance, a theme to start our game, already gives us some guides, because then with that theme I can find information, I can find other games, I can find a lot of material, and from that material I can develop my ideas. If we focus more, we can also think about the possibility of creating games based on a certain intellectual property. That means, for instance, something based on Kim Kardashian, for instance. It's a very not so usual intellectual property, but the Kim Kardashian game is actually quite profitable. So Based on this, we already have a very specific theme. We have this intellectual property caters for a very specific audience, and that helps us also to redefine or to define our own audience, and that maybe makes it easier for us then to think and ideate a game. But intellectual property can, for instance, also come from stories and narratives, from books, from TV shows, from movies, and we can just adapt that narrative to our game, or simply take the characters from that narrative and create our own narratives based on those characters. For the more technically oriented persons, something that is also very common is the creation of or design of games based on existing dynamics and mechanics. So we see a game, we understand what mechanics and dynamics that the game is about, and from that we can create a similar game, eventually adding new mechanics and new dynamics. Of course, as you can see, there is not a structured guideline to design a game, because it depends a lot on your personal interests. It depends a lot on public that you are targeting. It depends on your starting point. But this framework, it's called MDA, it's basically a framework that is used mostly to evaluate games, but can also be used to help you design a game. MDA stands for Mechanics, Dynamics, and Aesthetics. So aesthetics, in this case, it doesn't really refer to the visual aspect of the game, but rather the user experiences that we are trying to create. And when we do the evaluation, we sort of follow this path from mechanics, dynamics to aesthetics. When we design a game, the best is actually to do this path in reverse order, so starting from aesthetics, dynamics, and mechanics. And but it's really not necessary, because as we saw before, we can actually create a game based on its mechanics, and then move into dynamics and move into the aesthetics. But it's not, let's say, a fixed way of doing some game design, but actually it's a way to structure and make you think about the different aspects that compose the process of game design. Another proposal is from Jesse Shell. Jesse Shell proposed that a game design should cater for these four aspects: the aesthetics, and here is the visual part of the game, the mechanics, the story, and technology, and more importantly, to think about the different or the relative weight or importance of these factors. For some games, it's the mechanics that are more important, so the gameplay, and this means that, for instance, for casual games or action games, this is the case where gameplay is much more important. For adventure games and role-play games, it's the story part that is most important. For some games, the aesthetics is also very important. For others, it is not so important. For instance, Tetris, where it was a very successful game with very little relevance given to the aesthetics part. And beneath all this is the technology aspect. So technology is, of course, restraining your game design process, because when you are designing a game, you have to know which device are users going to run your game, because that is going to impose some restraints in your game design process. So if we think, for instance, and this is just an example, if we start designing a game thinking about the dynamics of the game, that implies that, for instance, we can consider using a dynamic for territorial acquisition, like the games Risk and Carcassonne, where we have a certain piece of territory and we try to make it grow by conquering the territory of our opponents. Or we can have a dynamic based on prediction. That means we try to anticipate what is going to be the move of our competitor. Or it can be a game based on random aspects like roulette or rock, paper, scissors. So it's a game we are not in mastering all the aspects, because there is some random aspect to it that we sort of try to anticipate. We can have our games based on the dynamic of spatial reasoning, so there is some visual pattern that we must master, for instance, like tic-tac-toe or Connect 4. We can have survival games, which basically means that we try to be the last one standing, like Fortnite, for instance. So we have to do everything that we can to survive in that game. We can have games based on collision dynamic. It's a very important dynamic because humans are natural pattern matchers. So this is the case for casual games, but also for card games, platformers. So basically we try to collect a certain type of items. We have games where we are chasing opponents or evading opponents, and ultimately this can lead to the survival dynamic. And games where we can have a trading dynamic, so we basically try to exchange resources with the other players. And finally, the most immediate, let's say, most easy to understand the dynamic, which is race to the end, where try to be the first to reach the goal line. So this is quite typical dynamic for games for kids. Games that are based, for instance, on the throwing a dice. So it's games that are very much based on luck. But this can also be applied to other games. So, for instance, if we then start in designing our game based on dynamics, we could select one or two of these dynamics, and from here we derive the story and narrative, we give a context to the game, and then we also can create the mechanics associated with these dynamics. Nowadays, we have a very interesting approach using artificial intelligence tools. This is a platform that actually gives a very good example how this works. I'm going to show you how this platform works. So I'm not affiliated with this platform, so just presenting it to you so you can know what is there on the market. So this is a artificial intelligence-based platform. It provides several tools for a game designer. Some very interesting tools are the market trends that give you an overview of what exactly the market is currently leading, what games are leading the market. So you can have some, for instance, slot machines, soccer management, pet shop, tycoon. And the most interesting aspect, besides knowing what is more profitable, let's say, or more marketable at the moment, is that then this platform allows you to create a game which is a replica of one of these games. So it's quite interesting if you want to do something that is easily marketable. Then the platform has other tools, for instance, an asset generator, an image generator, a chat assistant that works with you in the sense of producing a script for your game. So creating a story, a narrative, and the script deriving from that story of narrative. So basically, it's a different set of artificial intelligence tools that most of them you can actually find in other well-known tools, but everything is here in the same place, and you can actually use those tools. And another interesting aspect of this platform is when you actually have no idea but want to create a game, but you don't have any idea, any thoughts of what your game will be like. And it actually allows you to create a concept for a game. For instance, it makes 6 questions, and then you have decisions based on these questions. For instance, I define the platform it's running. I can define a genre. Now I can define the core mechanic. For instance, block manipulation, like a Sokoban type of game. The perspective, for instance, isometric. And now the world, the setting, the world, for instance, a submerged metropolis. I'm not sure what this will give us. And now the art style, for instance, voxel, or let's go for cartoonish. And it generates some ideas for my game. Okay, apparently I've reached the limit of my platform. The platform is actually not so cheap, But here you have the different approaches that it provided me. So you can see what is proposing is a Sokoban type of game. So Sokoban is a game where we have to push pieces to reach a certain goal, which might be escaping from a certain enclosed environment, or simply to put the pieces in the right places. So it provided me with 4 different, let's say, narratives, contexts, plus 4 different main mechanics for the game. And then I can develop further this game. I'm not going to do this because I don't have the credits to. But for instance, it can actually then help me create the mechanics, the objectives, the theme, the playable characters, the art for the game. And actually it can generate some code to be used, for instance, in Unity, a game engine, to create your game. So the platform is not perfect. It's still a bit rough, let's say. It doesn't really allow you to go from 0 to a full-fledged game just using the platform. With the code it generates, then you have to have a lot of extra material. But it is a good example of what the future can be. So this is also very interesting if you are starting to design games, because it will help you understand what are the major steps in game design. But it's very much based on existing games. In any case, I mean, you could start by creating a couple of games using this platform, and then that will allows you to understand what is the process of game design and how you can actually create your new game without these restrictions created by this platform. Like I mentioned, the platform is a little bit expensive, so right now it takes advantage of the fact that there are not many other platforms available. I expect that it becomes cheaper when there will be other platforms doing the same as this one. But it's a nice platform for you to explore. There are other tools based on artificial intelligence, like the Scenario, which creates AI models, or Charmed, which is another toolkit for AI game development, not as well, let's say, wrapped as Ludo. And of course, some game engines already provide their own artificial intelligence tools, like Unity, which already allows you to create some models, some avatars, and some code directly from AI prompt. Of course, artificial intelligence is very important at the moment, all the aspects of artificial intelligence, and we have to understand, acknowledge its relevance. Also for not game design, but for game development. So artificial intelligence allows us to think differently in terms of games. For instance, allows us to have procedural content generation. So that means content that is generated in real time. So we can have a true open world, because that open world can be created while we are playing. So it is not created beforehand. It's just created when you are playing the game. At the same time, for instance, artificial intelligence based on game analytics can adjust dynamically the difficulty of your game. So it is not too difficult, neither too easy. So you always feel immersed and in flow. And then there are other systems, other techniques, for instance, for multiplayer games to give you the appearance that you are playing in real time, when we know that that is not possible. There is always some lag, some delay between the connections. Some algorithms that allows to have the better matchmaking, so you never play with the players that are either too difficult or too easy for you. And some new approaches like cloud gaming, culling systems, and so on. So these are technologies and techniques mostly for game development, but they allow the game designer to be more creative. Because, for instance, if we are talking about an open world, then the game designer is not limited to a certain area or space. He can think on how actually a world can be continuously being created. So this renders very interesting for a game designer to know what is available and how we can use these technologies for game design. Of course, most game engines are now starting to actually have available most of these tools. I already mentioned Unity, which is one of the most important game engines. Unity, Unreal, GDevelop, they all have already some artificial intelligence tools that allows to make it quicker, the game development process. And then this gives more freedom to the game designer to add more functionalities, to add more possibilities into the game. And basically, this is what I wanted to show you. Thank you for being here. And if you have any questions, we'll have some time after for those questions. Thank you.